Hello, hello, welcome. I am just getting the room prepared. We're going to have a conversation with several panelists, venture capital industry, and we'll get started in a couple minutes here. I'm just setting up the room. Hola, Marcos, and hola, Marcos. Welcome.
Maite Cayo. Hola, Danae. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So, while we prepare and wait for everybody else to join us, how would you all like for me to address you? Do you prefer like Marcos F, Marcos G, or is there anything else that you would like me to do with that?
That's fine with me. This is Marcos G.
That works for me as well, Marcos F. And great to share a panel with you, Marcos. There's not many of us, and so it always warms my heart when I meet a fellow Marcos. So glad to
You,
do that on here.
you know what? You're right about that. My dad is Marcos as well, and
Nice.
growing up, I didn't know a single Marcos, and so you're right. There are very few. So it's great to meet you.
Yeah, same, same. Awesome.
I know that Valeria is going to be joining us in a couple of minutes.
Perfecto. And we're waiting for Laura. Let me make sure that she has the correct link. So we'll get started here in about a couple more minutes. We're just waiting for two more panelists. This is going to be a conversation about venture capital from the Latino lens. We have been having this conversation about just about every industry. This past week and last week, we hosted a couple of spaces here and on Twitter to discuss Latino representation in Hollywood. And we had every point of view from all types of stakeholders, everyone from the talent to the writers to the producers to even on the legislative side of things. We had Representative Joaquin Castro with us. So we've been really, really taking a look at Latino representation in most industries. We talk a lot about data, and then we talk about the problems. And more importantly, my favorite part about these conversations and these panels is that we talk about solutions and we talk with people who are being part of the change and being part of the solution. So that's why I'm so thrilled to be having this panel with you, and as we wait for the other panelists to come in here, because, yes, the representation in the venture capital industry is low, as it is with Latinos in many, many industries. However, there are people that are, leading the change, and you two are a couple of the ones that are definitely part of this. And so I wanted to have that conversation, talk about not just what VC, for those in our audience who aren't well versed, but also what the problems are and what the solutions are. And so excited to have you both here. If you'd like to go ahead and continue the conversation for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and make sure our other panelists jump in here.
Great. Marcos F. Can I give you my email address?
Of course.
It's Marcos at Vamos Ventures.
Perfect.
And if you wouldn't mind shooting me an email, and let's find some time to do a Zoom to at least introduce ourselves and learn more about what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll shoot you a note and would love to. And honestly, have been hearing about Vamos Ventures for a long time. So great to be able to catch up with you here and looking forward to sharing some great deals together in the future. And
Awesome. Awesome. Are you in Texas?
so I went to UT Austin for my grad school, but I'm in Northern California now.
Ah, okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and grew up in El Paso, Texas. So
Hmm.
have some strong roots back in the area, but reside in Northern California, closer to my wife's family now.
Got it. Got it. How close to San Francisco?
About an hour. So I'm east of the Sacramento area at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We've got an almost 2-year-old, and then we're having a little girl here in about a month. So
Awesome.
our priority is proximity to my wife's mom and dad. Get as
Mhm.
much help as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I know what you mean. Great. I see Valeria's on.
Hola,
I am.
Valeria.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Valeria Martinez with Vamos Ventures.
Hi, Valeria. So nice to meet you.
Likewise, Marcos.
That's
It's
that's gonna get confusing, I'm
Well,
sure.
a bit confusing.
okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully Laura will be able to jump in here, and I'll go ahead and introduce her, and then when she jumps in, we'll let her introduce herself as well. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. This is our AMA, or Ask Me Anything, with Latinos in VC. And I really, really am excited to have this conversation because our theme for Hispanic Heritage Month has been to really discuss Latino representation across many sectors, many industries. As I was saying, a couple of days ago, I think it was a Tuesday. I'm getting my days mixed up already. We had another panel, which was part two of a panel that we were having on Latino representation in Hollywood, right? And we had the legislative point of view, and we had the talents point of view, and the creators and showrunners. And really, we touched upon three things, which were: number one, what is the data, right? What do the numbers say? Number two, what are the problems that we see, from each one of the stakeholders and every point of view? And then number three, most importantly, what are the solutions that are being created? What are the ways that we can help, and just calls to action for people that are interested in becoming part of the solution. And so with this panel, we're talking about venture capital. And so I'll just jump into a little bit of the data, because y'all know I love my numbers. So as data from Crunchbase shows that Latino entrepreneurs receive only about 2% of US venture capital investments, despite making up nearly half of net new small business growth in the last 10 years. And you all know I love flexing this number, right? 2.8 trillion. That is what our economic output is, from a report by the Latino Donor Collaborative in conjunction with Wells Fargo. That makes us the fifth largest economy, if we were our own economy, right? And that's just Latinos in the US. And so, not to mention that Latinos are 1.7 times more likely to start a business than any other racial group in the US. Also, we're 19% of the population, and that population is expected to double in the next 4 decades. So, tremendous opportunity for economic growth. Latino startups are making huge contributions to the US economy. We're responsible for around 50% of net new business growth over the past decade. And Latino businesses are growing in annual revenue at 10% compared to 7% of white owned businesses. So while we're killing it in the creation, not so much in the growth. If it weren't for Latino startups and businesses, according to a Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative report, the total number of small businesses in the US would have actually declined between 2007 and 2012. And so all of this data, right, shows that we are a force. I'm always preaching about how mighty we are. And yet, the landscape, what it looks like for Latinos in venture capital is 2%, right? And so venture capital is critical for startups to scale, and it should be at least a little bit more equally distributed across founders in the startup landscape, and it's not. So that's why we're having this conversation, because the data shows that our representation is minuscule compared to what it should be. And so we have this panel of experts who are part of solutions. And so I wanted to introduce our panel real quickly. We have Marcos Fernandez. So he's the first Marcos, next to me. And he's the managing partner at Fiat Ventures and a partner at Fiat Growth, the fintech market's leading growth consultancy. He has an extensive operating background in the fintech space, having led business development at Ripple and go-to-market strategy and execution at SoFi. He spent a large part of the last decade advising and investing in companies primarily in the fintech space. Marcos holds an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin and an undergraduate degree in engineering management and chemical engineering from the University of Arizona. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2-year-old son and mountain biking with their dog Zephyr. So welcome, Marcos F.
Thank you so much for having me. And I know you introduced me as the first Marcos in order, but I definitely feel like the second on this call. So, but I will take whatever I can get. And thank you so much for having me today.
Gracias, gracias. And then we have Marcos Gonzalez to the right. Marcos is founder and managing partner at Vamos Ventures. And his career in strategy, private equity, and tech entrepreneurship led him to found Vamos Ventures, which is a VC fund striving to invest in high growth and overlooked opportunities represented by early stage tech companies led by Latino and other diverse founders. Vamos Ventures has successfully closed Fund 1 at 50 million and is preparing to raise a $100 million Fund 2. To date, the fund has invested in 25 companies and 22 are led by Latino or Latina entrepreneurs. Marcos graduated from Brown University, earned an MBA from Harvard Business School, and now resides in downtown Los Angeles. His parents immigrated from Mexico to the United States, where Marcos was born. He grew up in LA and began his career with IBM in Los Angeles and eventually joined the Boston Consulting Group after business school. So, Marcos G, welcome.
Thank you very much for introducing me. That's it's great to be here. And Marcos, if we're gonna share the podium, you and me, okay?
I love it.
I love it. And Marcos, just so in case you're not familiar with the platform, at the bottom right, you have a microphone. And when you're not, okay, never mind. He knows what he's doing. Okay. And up next is Valeria Martinez. Valeria is an investor at Vamos Ventures, a VC fund investing in diverse founders, particularly Latina founders who are building disruptive tech-driven solutions to some of today's most pressing problems. Valeria started her career with Deloitte Consulting, where she focused on the intersection of human capital and technology. After almost half a dozen years in consulting, she made the pivot to the investing world, gaining experience at funds like Harlem Capital, PayPal Ventures, Vivar Capital, and Stanford's Impact Fund. Valeria holds a BS from the University of Southern California Marshall School of Business and an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, where she also earned a certificate in public management and social innovation for her work and studies in social entrepreneurship. As the daughter of Mexican immigrant parents who started their own small business in the US, Valeria is proud to be investing in and empowering the communities she comes from. I love that. Welcome, Valeria.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here, everybody.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and also, you know what? No, we'll wait for Laura to join us, and then I'll go ahead and I'll introduce her. Okay. So I want to quickly jump right in and ask each of you a little bit about your trajectory in the world of VC. How did you get started in this world? And you know, tell us a little bit about the journey. So we'll start from the bottom up. I will go to Valeria first. Valeria, tell us a little bit about your trajectory.
Yeah, happy to. So I started my career off at Deloitte, like you mentioned, Danae, and there I spent a lot of time actually in Silicon Valley and helping a lot of tech companies think through their future of work strategies as well as their DE&I strategies, and quickly realized that I wasn't necessarily having the impact I wanted to have. I saw an immense lack of diversity within tech, and so I thought to myself, you know, how can I actually have a career with greater impact? Spoke to folks in my network, mentors, and kind of came to the realization that whoever kind of owns the capital and is responsible for deploying that capital to founders can have a say in who the future leaders within the tech world will be. So set my eyes on investing and Stanford Business School and did everything I could once I started at Stanford to get my hands on venture capital experience, leveraging organizations like Pledge Los Angeles, which is an organization here in LA that's dedicated to improving diversity in tech. It's actually how I met Marcos, was placed at an impact investing fund for an internship there. And then from there, I did a few other internships to get my hands on venture capital experience and stayed close with Marcos at Vamos Ventures. And when it was time to recruit full time, landed this role. And for me, it's sort of full circle. I come from small business owners, Mexican immigrant small business owners. So it's exciting to be sort of giving back to the communities that I come from. But I would say my journey was all about hustle, doing everything I could to get on deals and working a little bit for free at some VC funds for internships and doing everything I could to build a network within the startup ecosystem.
I love that. Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and go to Marcos G. Marcos, tell us about your trajectory. How'd you get started in business? And tell us about your journey.
You bet. Thank you. I had a career in strategy consulting and private equity investing, and it was in private equity that I learned about alternative assets and fund management and evaluating opportunities and making investments, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that I was kind of going down that path and everything was fine. But in the late 90s, I left. I was living in Washington, D.C., and I left to go to Boston to do a startup. And so this is the first internet days in the 90s. And me and my two partners, we started a company, we raised money, ran the business. We eventually sold the company. And I walked away having had an experience in the tech space, innovation, business building. But I thought, I'm not sure that this is exactly for me. I'm going to go back to private equity. So I went back to private equity in Washington, D.C., and continued working there for a good while. And in 2015, I was back in California for some events, and I ran into a guy, and he invited me to go up to the Bay Area to check out the tech, scene. And I think my reaction was like, sure, but I mean, I think I know what's up. But I went anyway, and I was so just overwhelmed with a couple of takeaways. One was that even though we know the headlines in the newspapers about, Meta does this, Google does that, Apple does this, whatever, until you're actually in the epicenter of it all. This is before COVID, right? So Silicon Valley from San Jose up to San Francisco in the East Bay, super active. And it doesn't hit you until you're there, just the amount of wealth being created. And, this very small part of the world that's defining the way we live our lives. And when I saw this up close, I realized, or I thought to myself, I don't see anybody else or very many people like me, or that look like me, or from neighborhoods like mine, or families like mine, and that's a problem. And so I started to explore, who was doing what, and I didn't find any funds out there that were focusing on Latinx entrepreneurs, and I didn't find a whole lot of folks, building anything around it. So that's when I decided to leave Washington, D.C., come back to Los Angeles, and start Vamos Ventures. And in those early days, like today, I think if you're a young person and you're interested in venture capital, there are a lot of people you can talk to, I think, relatively speaking. In those days, there just weren't. And and that's not that long ago. So anyway, that's that's kind of the way I got into it, and just being placed in the middle of it and realizing there was a need, a market opportunity, and a social urgency around it that led me to start Vamos Ventures.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I know. I love when you find that there isn't something serving a community, and you become the person that creates it. And so, love that trajectory. Thank you for that. Marcos F. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool to hear yours, Valeria and Marcos, just because there's so many similarities to mine. My mother and father both grew up in Mexico and came to the US, and really kind of built the foundations for themselves here and based on a lot of education. And I'm sure like you as well, like I'd love to tell you I had this vision of getting into venture capital and it happened these 5 ways, but a lot of it is luck, which is a combination of preparation and opportunity. So, for me, I started my career in consulting and worked on tech a lot, but didn't like the state and local government and healthcare spaces I was focusing on. So was lucky to get an MBA from UT Austin and find myself in a situation where, one of my classmates, she had interned in this brand new space called fintech, and this was back in 2014, and came out to the Bay Area to meet with a few companies. and walked into this room in the Presidio, and it was SoFi. And at that time, there's 50 people in a room just working on this. And it took me about 5 minutes to realize, like, wow, they're about to digitize financial services and create the first, digital bank. And this was pre-Chime, pre-Varo, pre-Moneyline, and it was really special. And so I basically grabbed on as hard as I could, right? Like being someone who grew up on the border with Mexico from two Mexican parents, like Marco said, and I'm sure Valeria has felt like there was not anyone who looked like me. Like a lot of people had these connections, and so very quickly I realized I'm not going to be the most connected person. I'm not going to come from the best universities or have the greatest experiences, but I'm going to outwork everyone because the only thing I can really control is the hustle that I bring and the attitude that I bring to everything I do. And that drives me today. Like the opportunities that I know that we have collectively just aren't available to a lot of people. And so that's what I did. I worked my butt off and came to a position where I was launching products at SoFi and getting them into every new service that they'd have, and got great experience. And went to Ripple where same kind of thing. Early days in crypto, got some incredible experiences, launched products, and then led business development, helped open up our offices across Southeast Asia. But regardless of like these great roles I had and work I was able to do, my side hustle was still advising and investing in these early stage companies. And I wasn't rolling in it, but writing these small checks, working with these founders, it was really like I would come off these coffee meetings on a high, realizing that like my day job was almost providing the opportunity to get the experience and network to really do this. So I started networking with a lot of venture capitalists, started soaking up books as much as I could read and understand about the landscape. And after we had our first kid here a couple years ago, and I was thinking about life after Ripple, I was fortunate to connect with my two current partners who they'd started this growth consultancy, which now has become the premier growth consultancy in fintech. And they're like, hey, we've worked with over 80 clients. We asked for these rights to invest in every single one, but we just don't have a pool of capital. And we know this is something we want to do. And I'll tell you, Danae, we have like not looked back ever since. So first day back at work, first meeting with my manager, I put in my 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a day later, that was March 16th of 2021, we started Fiat Ventures. And fast forward to today, we're just getting ready to close a $25 million fund, have made a lot of strong investments, getting ready to go back out there next year. And like Marcos had mentioned too, like for us, we don't have a particular diversity mandate, but we look at the world in a very similar way as Vamos Ventures. And what that is that, especially within financial technology, like it's one of the biggest proponents for promoting financial inclusion, mobility, and access. And we're huge proponents of that because we've seen it firsthand. And two is that you can do good and perform well. And I think a lot of people think that those are mutually exclusive. But because we've all grown up in these communities where we know that we're underserved, our families, our communities are being underrepresented, we see opportunities very differently, and we tend to back founders who view it the same way. And so for us, over half of our founders that we do put capital into are of underrepresented backgrounds, whether that's based on gender or a minority of other categories. Like it's not just the right thing to do, but it's this huge opportunity. And yeah, that's a little bit more of why we started what we're doing, but also just the mission that drives us day in and day out, both on our venture capital fund and our consultancy.
I love that. I'm a big proponent of do good and do well, and I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. So I love that you said that. Okay, so now that we've gotten our intros out of the way, I would love it if, and this is open to anybody who wants to take a stab at this question. Uh, what is the easiest way that you can, and the reason I'm asking this is because I'd say a pretty decent part of our community isn't well versed in venture capital, and so I wanted to make sure that we had a clear understanding of what VC actually is and where you live in this in the ecosystem, right? What does your company do in the ecosystem of VC? So this one is open to anybody. If anybody just wants to do a quick overview and where you land there.
Sure, happy to jump in first. So at Fiat Ventures, we invest primarily in fintech, but in a very broad sense. And what I mean by that is, Google and Apple, those are fintechs. Like every single company under the sun has some sort of component with payments or other financial services. And the role that we play is pretty simple. We advise companies at all stages, and we primarily invest in these early stages. And what we do is we really help them not just from a capital perspective, but we all have operating backgrounds. And then we have this massive arm of our consultancy where if they need help on implementing a marketing stack or going into influencer marketing or different programs, we have experts and teams that can actually help bring that to life. And in the broader VC ecosystem, we're seen as really like these broader, greater connectors. And I'm sure Marcos and Valeria will talk about this a bit, but one of the most important things we do is help connect great founders with other great VCs, and vice versa. Other VCs will connect us with great founders. And we play this really collaborative role where others will look to us if they know that we've advised a company because they know that we have this extended due diligence from working with their companies. And vice versa, if we've advised someone and have invested, it sends out the signal that this is someone that you should be paying attention to because we're in the trenches with them and seeing some good things. So that's the role that we play. Now, backing out real quick, and then I'll pause. Is venture capitalists, the way I like to describe it. Sometimes people get it confused where VCs are kind of like the ones out there. The analogy I use is like the entrepreneurs are the rock stars, and the VCs are the roadies. Like we help set the stages and the foundations and get people into there and help them solve a lot of problems. But at the end of the day, it's truly the founders who are creating the opportunity for us to even be able to invest. And our role is really to support them as much as we can based on the backgrounds that we have and the connections that we can make. That'll differ whether you're taking a board seat or whether you're a more passive investor. But really what we always make sure to let folks know is like, our role here is to play support for you. We will always give you our opinions, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to bring things to life. I'll just stop there though, and kind of pause and let Marcos and Valeria share their perspective as well.
Great. Thanks, Marcos F. Marcus G here. I want to step back a little bit. I don't know exactly the folks in the audience right now in terms of the familiarity with venture, but if I were going to just categorize three kinds of capital out there, there are folks out there that invest in traditional businesses, and it could be anything from restaurant, brick and mortar business, or even the stock market. Something that's very highly liquid. You can buy and sell at any time. Then maybe there's another one, which is debt, and a lot of folks look for debt to finance their business. And venture capital is characterized by a couple of things that are pretty unique, and I think this is what causes sometimes a lot of noise in the market, and that's that venture normally looks for software-related companies, technology-based companies that are going to grow at a very high rate with very little capital. And you'll hear venture capital say, I'm looking for a high growth, capital efficient, scalable business. And that is traditionally what someone looks for from a venture side. We look for that too. And we look for that across four different sectors, and that's financial services, which I hope Marcos F. We can all kind of talk about this after the fact, so we can see how we can collaborate there. But financial services, health and wellness, sustainability, and future of work. And Valeria on this call, she leads our future of work area, and I know she'll jump in later to talk more about that. And we look at early stage companies, so companies that have some traction but are still raising their seed round, maybe even their friend and family round. So we'll go pretty early, but it's really rare for us to invest in a company that's just one person or two people and an idea. We only invest in the United States. I don't know if this happens to you, Marcos, but we get the question all the time. When we say we're going to invest in Latino and Latino entrepreneurs, people will ask, what countries are you going to be investing in? And I always say this one. And they look at me like I have two heads on my shoulder. And it's taken a while, but I think most people now realize that there are tech entrepreneurs who are Latino or Latina in this country doing pretty amazing things. So those are our four sectors. It's early stage, and we have a lot of latitude in terms of the teams that we can invest in. But the spirit of Almost Ventures is all about Latino and Latino entrepreneurs. And our goals are two things. One is to deliver market rate returns. To an earlier point about doing well and doing good. And then two is meaningful impact through wealth creation, social mobility, and relevant solutions based on technology that address persistent problems. So our position in the market is, yes, we're investors, but we're more than investors. And I'll let Val talk about this a little bit more, but part of the ethos and the values here is that, we need to make money for sure, but we recognize um, that there's a role for folks like us and funds like ours to take a visible stance in the ecosystem and advocate and support the progress of our community.
Yeah, thank you, Marcos. Danae, if I can just jump in here on just to add a little bit more color on what Marcos was just sharing there towards the end. I think Marcos F and Marcos G have alluded to this, that we're investors first, but we play a lot of different roles and wear a variety of hats. At Vamos, we see ourselves in a variety of other different buckets, if you will, in addition to investors. We are also pipeline builders. For example, at Vamos, every year we have a cohort of summer associate interns that we bring on board to really learn the ins and outs of venture capital. And some of those interns actually go on to find roles at other VC firms. So it's great because we actively seek diverse talent to bring on board as interns, to therefore be able to place diverse talent into the ecosystem. We also have an annual scout program, which a bit different from the internship program, but still allows scouts some visibility into the venture capital ecosystem. And certainly we make an effort to stay connected to them as they make progress in their careers, et cetera. The other hat I would say that we wear, we're certainly we empower our community, if you will, and that's through serving as mentors to founders, sitting on panels, educating founders around pitching, building their decks, etc. Actively involved in our community in various ways of that nature. But I think most importantly at Vamos, we're really trying to take, as Marcos G mentioned, a visible stand that investing in Latino founders is a financial opportunity for our country, an opportunity for innovation, and a social opportunity to really improve our Latino community and therefore the broader U.S. community. So I'll pause there and hand it back to you, Danae.
Thank you for that. So I have to say, you were talking about pipeline, and I wanted to go down that route for a minute. Let's talk pipeline. Are there fewer or more Latino projects that are VC worthy? What are you seeing in the pipeline from your unique point of view? I'll just leave it at that. I could expand, but I really want to see, what do you see in the pipeline when we talk about Latino startups that are VC worthy from your point of view? And that's open to anybody.
Maybe I'll just quickly, not to monopolize this by Vamos Ventures, but I'll say that looking back at 2015 to today, it is tremendous the amount of change that I've seen in the market. You know, I think generally speaking, it's spurred on by two things, maybe three. One is that back in the day, graduating from business school or even undergrad, young Latina folks thought success is working at Goldman, McKinsey, these kinds of places. I never run into anybody, I never did back then, about entrepreneurship. Today, people don't want to work at Goldman necessarily. They want to be the next, Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg. So there's, I think, a very different mentality in the younger generation, number one. Number two is that we're a young demographic. And as young folks are growing up and getting into the workforce and developing ideas and seeing what's possible, we're just seeing tremendous explosion across sectors. So in our pipeline, it's just exploding. It's actually the number one challenge for us and it's the hardest thing about this job. In my view, I'd love to hear what Marco Seth thinks, but in my view, it's saying no to so many folks. We obviously don't just say no, we do other things, but not being able to write a check to everybody is really hard. In terms of VC backable, that's a I know what you mean by that, but it's a nuanced category or label because VCs make decisions on a lot of things, and I think the quality of businesses we're seeing today is amazingly different than it was 5 years ago. when when I was starting going down this path, or 7 years ago. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Marcos F here from Fiat, and completely agreed. Like I think well, first off, one, the hardest part of this whole job is to get to know founders, understand their products and services, and for some reason just not be able to invest. Like that is truly the most disappointing. On the flip side, when you do invest and you do work together, it's one of the most rewarding, but that's never fun. And we can spend time talking about, the rights and wrong ways to do that, and still learning that. As far as, Latino and Latina talent, I've been really pleasantly surprised to continue to see more and more strong founders and individuals entering our network and building. And I know at Vamos they'll recognize this too, is some of those are products and solutions focused on, the Latino and Latina market here in the US. Other ones are just businesses that they start, and they have a acute understanding of that because of, their past experiences professionally. I'll give you one example of one that we've invested in our last couple rounds, have worked alongside them. It's a company called Sigo Seguros. It's if you look it up, essentially what they've done is created a product starting with auto insurance focused on the Hispanic community in the U.S. And it's a problem that the CEO Nestor felt because his family's from Uruguay. They came to the U.S. and they understand that sometimes underwriting criteria isn't reflective of the true nature and credit risk and worthiness of that industry. And because of that, they have this, website that really caters to people like a lot of us on the call who have grown up in these communities and seen how sometimes traditional underwriting excludes certain groups, and how brick and mortar stores can play a key role. But as digital finance expands, there's this big opportunity. And just kind of a long-winded answer, they're killing it because people are resonating with this product, and it's because it's a team who understands this because they grew up in those communities. And on our side, I've been their biggest advocate for it because I've grown up in these communities and seen it. And they continue to be successful. Another quick example, Spinwheel. They're building a lending as a service component, part of embedded finance as a whole, and have done some incredible things. We've not invested because they're a little bit later stage, but have advised them. Tomas Campos is someone who grew up in Oakland and understands these problems and is a huge proponent for helping out folks across the Latino and Latina spectrum, but isn't a product geared towards it. And so two probably long-winded examples, but to share with the rest of the group that there's more ways of helping out our community and thinking about how to back it other than just building solutions for it. There's ways that you can do it specifically for it, and there's ways that you don't. But overall, you are seeing more and more people becoming more comfortable in both investing and starting these opportunities. And then, like Vamos Ventures, there's a plethora of wonderful organizations out there like Chingona Ventures or Latitude or these other ones that also understand these problems. And so it really does become this generational solution that we're all providing, not just year over year, but company over company, and each new success will spin out the next ones. Love the fact that Vamos has this entrepreneur or this internship program to help just train and teach. We do a lot of the same things on our end to just give people exposure where previously none was available. So yeah, long answer for a very simple question again, Danae, but there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of great founders, and it feels like it's getting better and better with each cycle, which is exciting for I know for us and hopefully for everyone on this call.
Thank you for that. You mentioned something here, strong founders. Uh, I would love to learn from each of you. What makes a strong founder or founding team? What about the founders, specific qualities, maybe, or just, I don't know, things that they bring to the table? What do you look for in a founder or a founding team that makes you, it shifts you into really, really wanting to invest in this project?
Sure, Marcos F here from Fiat Ventures. I'll kick it off and then we'll hand it over. But teams are everything, right? So founding teams are by far the most important dynamic behind a company, and The reason being is that every single business will change over time. What you start with is never what it looks like over time, or very rarely you see that happen. And those founder dynamics are incredibly important, especially in how those co-founders interact with each other, how they kind of divide and conquer, how they provide space. The primary reason for a lot of companies failing go back to those founder dynamics. Now, for each individual, especially for those that are kind of taking the lead, one of the biggest things that we look for is not just a founder who knows how to run through walls, because everyone will always have to do that, but who know how the right walls to run through and who know where their gaps are. It's always the founders who try to do everything themselves, where they run out of time and resources and don't build a team around them. In our personal experience as operators and as investors, the most successful founders are the ones who know where their gaps are and find the right people in their network to fill those gaps who have much better experience than they have themselves. So one of the key things that we're always asking for is like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what are your biggest challenges? And it's those founders who are very specific about these are the three things that are really stressing me out right now. Here's my approach. And then they hire the right people to solve them. That is a huge, huge compliment to them to not let ego get in the way of the fact that like all of us have gaps, and the quicker that we know that and can fill those, the better. Um, Tons of other stuff to dive into, but I will pause there in case Marcos, Chia, or Valeria want to hop in with anything else.
Yeah, Thank you, Marcos F. I'll add a few things to that, and definitely agree with everything that you shared. I think that some of the things that I particularly look for, the first being sort of this concept of founder market fit. So meaning, why is this founder or this founding team the best fit to solve this problem, to tackle this problem? Why are they the only ones that could potentially do it? That's particularly important. The second, I think, is how visionary the founders or founding teams are. Are they looking to completely revolutionize or disrupt an industry? And can you tell that they, are thinking thoughtfully and intentionally and long term about their company? And then I think the third for me is passion. How passionate are they about tackling this problem? I think the founder journey and the journey of building and scaling a startup is not easy. And so how passionate are they about what it is that they're building to get them through some of these kind of hurdles, if you will? And probably also equally important is how passionate are they about what they're building, and can they communicate it effectively to be able to raise additional rounds, for example, but also to hire good talent. I'll pause there and see if Marcos G wants to add anything.
Thank you, Val. I agree. I'll echo both of you guys, and I think that's important. I look for when I think about a strong founder. There's a lot of things that you need to be able to do, and I'll say that for anyone in the audience that's already an entrepreneur, you probably have an idea of what you need to do, and if there's any aspiring founders, the way I kind of describe a strong founder is usually as an athlete, and there are so many things that you just don't expect to happen that you're going to have to call audibles all the way down the field. And you got to be able to throw, pass, kick, run, jump. I mean, everything will come up. And I think as a professional and a business leader, you need to be able to do all those things too, whether it's hiring a team, building a team, thinking about culture, doing analysis, getting into the weeds, developing relationships, being in sales, thinking about customer support. I mean, all those things you need to do. I think that it's really rare to have somebody who just has vision and then brings the people together. It usually takes somebody who can do a lot of things to get things going is what I look for. And then finally, I'd say that what's really important to me is understanding why you're doing this and who are you and why are you doing this. And a lot of entrepreneurs I meet, they get right into the pitch, and I try to slow them down or stop them, and just say, well, before we get into it, where are you from? And tell me about where you grew up, and do you have any siblings, and et cetera. And we kind of just get to know each other. And this is a long-term game, and you're in relationships with people for 5 to 10 years or more. And so you do want to get to know people, get an idea of their values. There is a saying, I think Warren Buffett or one of these luminaries says, do you want that person, that's got, great integrity, but maybe not the brightest, bulb in the pack? Or do you want the guy who's amazingly brilliant, but questionable integrity? And you always go with the integrity and values, and build around that. So I think that's what's really important to me.
Yes, I love that quote. It's one of my favorites, actually. Okay, let's go back to the founders. So one of the things that private that VC partners can do is they can be a part of your board. Can you explain what would make you choose to be more involved as part of the board of directors of an organization where you're investing? Uh, is there something specific that makes you say, okay, we definitely need to be on the board? Or no, you've got this. Would love to hear you elaborate a little bit about that.
I think that I know Marcus has some points on this too, but I think for us, when we lead a deal, well, let me step back. Not every company has a board, and they'll have technically a board, but it's the founders. It's no investors. When it's very early stage, it's rare to find a company with outsiders on the board. So if you're investing in friend and family round, sometimes even the seed round, there is no board. I've even seen an A round, when there's yet to be a board defined. So that's one, the stage of the company. Second is how much money you're putting in. If you're putting in $100,000 and it's a $5 million round, you're unlikely to be invited to be on the board. And if you issue an ultimatum and say we won't invest $100,000 if we're not on the board, they're going to say thank you very much, but it's fine. We got the other 4.9 million. So it's how much money you invest. And then third is what kind of value can you add? So there may be a situation where you are 100,000 out of 5 million, but you know this industry frontwards and backwards. You know a lot of folks that you can bring to the table from a business development standpoint or a talent standpoint, or you can bring great strategic perspective to the team, in which case it makes a lot of sense, even if you're a small check, to be part of the board. For us, we're going to invest in 40 companies in our first fund, 40. We're a small team, so there is no way we're going to be on all these boards. So what we look at is what I just mentioned. Are we a big enough check? Is the company far along enough? And can we add meaningful value to the business? And that's how we make our decisions. And of course, it has to align with the company too. So I don't think we've ever said to a founder, you must put us on the board or we're out. It's a discussion. We think about it. We're observers in other companies where maybe they already have folks on the board and they don't want to expand it. And that's fine too. So it's a little bit of, you can see there's kind of a natural structuring here, but it really comes down to, from what I see anyway, comes down to those things: stage of company, dollars you're investing, and value add potential.
Well said, Marcos G. Spot on all of those points. I think one thing I might add in addition, just for those who are on the call who may not be as familiar with how rounds are set up, one term that Marcos mentioned is leading rounds, and essentially what that means is in any venture capital round, there is usually like one primary venture capital fund who takes responsibility to set the economics for the round, the investment terms of the round, especially if it's a price round or if it's not using convertible debt like safe notes. And in that case, to Marcos's point, of our fund, we have now made 22 investments. We've led five of those. When we take the pen and when we lead deals and when we're putting in more meaningful amounts of capital, we will always ask for a board seat, or if it's earlier stage, a board observer seat. And really, a lot of that for us is to make sure that we can provide some protections to our investors and have a more active role with a lot of the ongoing decisions that company will make. And so, uh, spot on to everything that he said. Just some additional context for folks on the call who may not be familiar with those terms. Now, one thing I'll call out is I think a lot of times when people hear like, oh, these people are taking a board seat or you sit on this board, it has some sort of notion of like legitimacy. It makes it sound like this is really cool and exciting, but the truth of the matter is board seats are very time consuming. They're time consuming. You actually take on a bit of liability because you're part of very important decision making. And it also means that it's pulling your attention in different ways. So, like Marcos mentioned, you can't do it very often, or else you're going to get spread too thin. And when you do want to lead forward and take it, you really need to have a ton of conviction behind the team you're backing, behind the space that you're in, and the value that you can bring to those conversations. And so, you really want to make sure that you are as careful with the types of board seats that you want to take as much as those founders and founding teams should absolutely be careful with those board members that they want to bring on. And a lot of times, at least for us, that's a pretty long relationship. So will only lead deals if we've invested in the past and if we've worked with these teams and some extent from our advising so that we have the ability to be in the trenches with them and see a lot of things. And then, like I'd mentioned, when you do take those on, you do take on a huge responsibility. And so as we were taking on these roles, spent a lot of time with our legal counsel, with our advisors and mentors, making sure that we had a full grasp of our responsibilities. And yeah, outside of that, you just take them very seriously and spend a lot of time with those companies. That's pretty much all I have to add on to that, Denny.
Gracias. Valeria, did you want to jump in on this?
Danae, no, I think that the two Marcoses here covered it very well. I think that the biggest thing for me is there some deep experience or expertise in the industry, for example, or have I seen this in the past? Have that would really encourage someone like myself to take a board observer seat to make sure that my role is truly additive. But very similar to what the two Marcos has already shared.
Great, great. Okay, so I want to talk about the very, very first baby round, right? The friends and family. Uh, so the reality is that a lot of Latinos, we don't have that generational wealth where we can say, oh, yeah, we have a bunch of friends and family who can pool together $500,000 so that we can launch our company. It's just not the reality for a lot of Latino startups. And while those numbers are changing and more of us are graduating from colleges and, creating those connections and being part of those communities, it's still not where we would want it to be. And so when we look at this, right, my question is, and I know we have several founders in the audience, what would you tell them whenever somebody tells them, oh, you should be able to uh, muster up X number of dollars from friends and family first before we look at you? Can you tell me a little bit about how you view that and what your advice would be to anybody that is a startup that is trying to go go to the first step of fundraising?
Sure. Marcos F here from Fiat. Um, Biggest piece of advice I tell you is, like, but buckle up. Like it's a tough fundraising environment for anyone. There are some folks who are fortunate to have those friends and family that they can lean on, but there are a lot who don't. And so just know that you're gonna get, nine no's to every, 10 conversations, and it truly is a numbers game. And so really like get scrappy with it. And um, the unfortunate reality for a lot of us in the US, especially minorities in the US, regardless of your background, is like sometimes you don't know if you're getting a no because of, how much melatonin's on your skin or your name. And sometimes you don't know if it's generally because someone wants to pass on you. But I just want Jewel to know that regardless of backgrounds, it's just a really tough fundraising environment. So the best things that you can do, and I always advise the very earliest folks, is seek the types of opportunities that are available to you. There's a lot of great accelerators or grant programs or things that are out there specific to Latinos and Latinas who are building out companies. And then two is before you ever have your hand out asking for a dollar, build a network of advisors. And it's that classic rule of if you want really great advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for really great advice. And start to approach people who you know may be angel investors or access to angel investor networks or venture capital funds and say, listen, here's my name, here's what I'm trying to build. I'm not raising, but I'd love to get your opinion on how I should approach this and build those relationships, and those will turn into checks and dollars. And last thing I'll mention, and then I'll pause and hand it over to the Vamos team, but just be sure to disqualify quickly as well. So oftentimes it's innate in human nature to try to win over people who may not like us or who are close, but it's really your job as a founder and entrepreneur to ask those questions up front of, are you actively deploying? What is your typical process? What's your typical check size? To make sure that you're also disqualifying opportunities and trying to spend as much time as possible on those who are most likely to convert. So those are just some of those more tactical strategies that you can use to just make sure that you're building a big, robust pipeline of people that you're talking to. And in the earliest stages, it's definitely a little bit tough, but there's angel networks, there's grant programs, there's accelerators who cater to the earliest stage of entrepreneur. And then as you graduate into that seed and post seed, your investor strategy and your investor type will change. So again, just know the odds are in your favor better now than they've ever been before, but it will take a lot of scrappiness, grit, creativity to pull it all together. But there are resources out there for you, and um, it's just it's not going to be as easy as just making a couple phone calls, unfortunately. I'll pause there though and hand it over to Marcos G and Valeria.
Thanks, Marco Seth. What I would add to that is it is difficult, absolutely, but it's important in two things. One, it's important to be prepared. So meaning practice and practice and practice your pitch and know your story and know your numbers. And what I mean by that is, build your pitch deck, share it with friends, share it with your mentors, advisors, pitch to people before you ever set room in an investor room and pitch to an investor. And so, things to really hone in on, being able to concisely and effectively convey the problem you're tackling, the solution, understanding your market. Is it a big market opportunity? Is it scalable? What does your competition look like? What is your value prop? What sets you apart from the competition? What is your business model? Is it scalable? How are you going to make money, essentially? And probably at this stage, not too much from a metrics financials perspective, but to the extent that you can share that there is, some traction there, that's particularly important. And then I think making sure that you're very clear on your ask. What are the milestones that you're looking to hit with, whatever money that you're asking for, etc. So it's important to have all of these elements in your pitch down and being very comfortable in conveying them to investors. And the other thing I'll say, which I think Marco Seth alluded to, was doing your research on investors and really finding investors that are going to believe in what you're building and that are aligned from an investment thesis perspective to what you're building.
Um, Absolutely. I like the quote. I say it often, the quote that Marco Seth mentioned, which is ask for advice, you get money, and ask for money, you get advice. And there's another one. I haven't heard anybody say it, but I say it all the time. And that's you have to look for the investors that are already looking for you. And it is absolutely a long haul unless you have a lot of relationships or you get lucky. But as been mentioned, we have limited. Traditionally, our community has limited friends and family resources, so it is a real effort, and you cannot if you go into it thinking that it's going to be done in a month or a couple of weeks, you may be setting yourself up for a frustrating experience. You have to be realistic about it, but you have to be thoughtful and smart about to touch on Valeria's point, is that you need to figure out who out there right now is looking for this kind of opportunity to invest in a founder like you. And I think that thinking about it in that perspective could be very helpful.
So, going to figuring out who out there is looking for an opportunity to invest in a founder like you, that's a really important statement. How do you go about looking for people who are seeking out opportunities to invest in what you have created or what you're working on creating?
I think that, doing a lot of research. For example, if you're raising a some amount of money, it's early stage, and it's in the fintech world, financial services. You do your research and you come upon Fiat, and you notice there's a guy there by the name of Marcos Fernandez. You do your research about Marcos Fernandez. Who is he? Where did he go to school? Where does he live? You don't stalk him, but you do want to understand who is this person and what kind of investments have they made? Are there any deals there that are maybe similar or related? You try to get as much intelligence as possible and you're prepared to reach out. Before you reach out, you go to LinkedIn and you say, okay, who knows Marcos Fernandez? Oh, here's a guy who I know, Marcos Gonzalez, who happens to be connected with Marcos Fernandez. You reach out to Marcos Gonzalez and you say, "Can you please make a warm intro? Here's what I'd like for you to say. Here is the blurb." You make it as easy as possible. I'm giving an example of the kind of things you just you can't just I think willy nilly just kind of reach out cold. You can, but you can really optimize your opportunity by doing a lot of research on who has invested in companies like mine. If you happen to be based in, and I'll make it up, if you happen to be based in Santa Fe, who has actually invested in New Mexico? Of this list of VC funds or early stage investors, who's invested in financial services in New Mexico? Who's invested in diverse founders in financial services in New Mexico? And you look for folks that have demonstrated that kind of interest in the past, and then you figure out who they are and you figure out how you may be able to get to them without it being a cold email. If you have to go cold, you go cold. But chances are there's a way to do it. Then when you reach out, I remember raising this fund, and there were times when, I'd fly across the country just to have 30 minutes with somebody. I know that's harsh and it gets expensive, but you look for other things to do while you're there. And I've ridden in cabs with people, from wherever their office is to the airport just to have 30 minutes with them. And so I think you got to do what you have to be willing to go that extra mile, camp out, and do whatever you need to do once you have found those folks through research.
I Oh, sorry, Valeria, please go ahead.
I'll be quick, Marco Steph.
No, no.
The what I'll say is taking a step back in terms of how do you even start your research. There are a few of publicly available lists on Airtable, for example, and Crunchbase of investors that you can download and just sift through. That will give you the location of the fund. Sometimes they'll give you a little bit of what types of investments, what stage they invest in. So that's certainly a very good way to just see what is out there in terms of investing firms. And Crunchbase in particular has been, as of recently, publishing a list of diversity focused investors that you could certainly download and take a look at, and then use Marcos's G's advice in terms of how do you actually get in front of people like this. But just wanted to put out there that there are publicly available lists of all of the a good amount of VC funds out there that you can certainly leverage.
That was way more impactful than what I was going to say, Valeria, and spot on. There are so many resources out there to you. And then I'll echo on Marcos G. Like I've had similar success where as the world continues to open up, especially for folks that you know are right on the edge or that you feel like you've got these great relationships with, get scrappy. Like there's no better way of really building that connection than getting in front of someone. Because at the end of the day, we're just humans dealing with other humans. It's truly everything that we do is all about people and driving that. And sometimes it takes that extra creativity and scrappiness to get it done. And another thing that both Valeria and Marcos G mentioned that I will just harp on again is the best intros that you can get are warm intros. The top ones are from people who have already invested in you. So asking them, is there anyone else in your network who you think you can introduce me to? And asking for them to do so. The next best are entrepreneurs in your network. So, hey, we're looking to raise capital. Any investors that you recommend? And then last ones are just advisors, right? So people that you know. And so you always want to build out, again, this network of advisors and trusted people around you who can take care of you. And I'll tell you, like, candidly, a strategy that we use that's been really successful is we love a whole bunch of VCs and emerging funds. Like, we do a lot of deals together, but we will also get together and say, cool, who are three of your LPs? I'll give you three of my LPs and horse trade. Like, we will literally sit down there and make intros to each other and make sure it's mutually beneficial. But we all know that we're out here trying to raise capital for us VCs from our investors. And it's the same strategy that you should use on your side. So just know the more that you help out, the more you can ask for help, you can play that role. The last thing I'll leave with you, and that any founders on the call, make sure you really master, is the forwardable email. At some point, someone will say, I'd love to, I'm thinking of this person. What you do is you say, great, can I send you an email that you can forward along to them with more information on us? And they will always say yes. And your goal with this email is to keep it simple. Who you are, what you're doing, few bullet points of what makes you special, link to a deck, link to a Calendly. Because your goal then as a founder is to try to create as little friction in between an offer to connect and that actual connection as possible. And that will always lead you to the best connections. So just know that if someone offers something, it's up to you to follow up and to make sure it happens and help them set the right tools in place to be able to forward that on. So another just little tactic that we've seen work really well and that we advise all of our founders on is that forwardable email. Everything else spot on from Valeria and Marcos G.
Wow, these were absolutely wonderful tips. I love the forwardable email, with just the absolute bullet points about what makes you special, who you are, what you're doing, and a link to your deck and a link to your Calendly. I think that's immensely helpful. And I also love the share about Airtable and all of the resources on that. So we'll definitely be sharing that with our community. I know that we've already been at this for over an hour, and I definitely want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to any of our audience members. If you're in the audience and you would like to ask a question about venture capital, the space, and there really is no silly question. So if you feel like you have a question that may be silly, the only silly thing is if you don't ask it. So if you'd like to come up and join us and ask your question, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up the room in the next, I'd say 10 minutes. Are you all good with about 10, maybe 15 minutes more?
Sure, no problem on my side.
Yes, happy to, Danae.
Great.
Gracias. Perfecto. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I see we have Carmen Medrano. Carmen is an entrepreneur. She owns a business called Loteria Paleteria. And I'm so glad that you chose to join us and ask your question, Carmen. Go ahead and ask away.
So yeah, this is very serendipitous. Tomorrow I have a 30-minute coaching with a venture capital here at UNM Taos. And it's a Taos Hive, which is kind of our business hive that kind of helps us. And I will be meeting with them tomorrow at 9. And it's a 30-minute question, coaching opportunity. What are the major things that I need to ask to take the most benefits in this 30-minute coaching session?
So I'll kick it off. Marcos F here from Fiat. Congrats on getting the meeting is one. That's a great step. Two is, and I believe as Marcos, you mentioned this earlier, do as much research as you can on them. I'm sure you already done this, but go on LinkedIn. Where have they worked before? What is their path in life? Google their name, go to their sites, understand what really drives them. How do they think about investing? What have they invested in recently? Your goal in 30 minutes, and I know it's a session set aside for you, is to learn as much as you can about them and to walk out of that meeting with a mentor. Again, seek an advisor, seek someone who you can trust, ask as many questions as you can, like how did you get to this stage? What really drove you? If you could give someone in my shoes any advice, how would you think about that? All of these things that you can really drive to build that relationship. And I guarantee you at minute 25 of 30, if you're in there asking these really good, thoughtful questions and showing that you've done your homework on their backgrounds, it's going to end with, listen, we've talked too much about me. Is there anything I can do for you? And just make sure that you've got your ass tight. And that ask is listen, I'm thinking about raising capital here. Is there anyone in your network who you think I should be speaking with? How would you go about it if you're me? Some of these questions, and then it'll turn the conversation back to it. But long-winded answer for whenever you have these moments, try to build as deep and strong a connection as possible with that individual on a one-to-one basis. Focus less on the investment, focus more on just finding yourself an incredible advisor and mentor, and everything else will work out well.
Yeah, I think what Marcos F shared is incredibly valuable, and I completely agree. The one thing I would add is, at the end of the conversation or wherever in the conversation this happens, but when you get asked, what can I do for you? I would take my research one, level up and go on this person's LinkedIn and see if there's anyone in their network that you want to connect with. If there's an investor that they're connected to, or a subject matter expert, whoever it may be that might be in their network, and come to the meeting with, that one or two people that perhaps they can make that warm introduction to. As I think we've shared on this call, warm introductions are everything.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything. And I'm nervous, but excited.
You'll do great. Good luck.
You'll do great. Yes.
I love it. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Carmen, for coming up and asking your question. Up next, we have Christine E.B. Howard. Christine, do you have a question for the panel?
Hi. So I own a consulting firm. We're in the non-dilutive funding space, do a lot with small business innovation research. And we hear a lot about how non-dilutive funding helps de-risk investment, which, yay, is great. Do you have any advice or recommendations outside of, grant funding? Are there other advice or recommendations for startups to help de-risk your investment?
Sure. I'll start that on my side. Marcos F here from Fiat again. There's several different things that you can do to de-risk an investment. What I would encourage every early stage founder is to focus less on quantity versus quality of what you bring to the table. So Valeria mentioned a term that we love is founder market fit. So how did you start this company? What insight do you have that's unique to everyone else out there that helped you do it? Did you work in this industry? What got you there? If you've got stronger founder market fit there, lean on that. That de-risks it because it shows that you know what you're doing. If you've got an investor network or already have some people who have backed you, lean on that. Drive FOMO by saying who has given us some capital, who believes in us already. Lean on traction in your ability to get products off the ground, or what insights are you getting from your customers or pipeline of customers that is telling you that you're onto something here. But what I'd say is like where people often miss is when they're trying to showcase too much. It's better to focus on two or three really strong indicators of what's driving you to build this, and leaning on those a little bit more than trying to go too wide too quickly. And that'll help with conversations with investors, get you into those accelerators, help you tighten your pitch. And it's all trial and error. Like the company you're building, you'll see what works with some investors, what doesn't, and then you'll perfect that pitch over time and really identify like what your wedge is at that particular moment. So that's just some examples of how you can de-risk yourself.
Christine, if I understood the question, it was some additional sources beyond grants for funding. Is that was that also part of your question? Just to confirm. Got
No.
it. Okay.
Yeah, no. The question was, what are other things that startups can do to help de-risk investment?
Got it. Yeah, I think what Marcos F shared, I think is something that I completely agree with. I think it's being able to give the investor confidence in that you're the right person to be building this, and being able to showcase that you are in fact thinking about the company from a long-term perspective, because you will get some of those more strategic long-term vision types of questions, and just making sure that you make it known that you are in fact thinking about those types of things versus just immediate short-term, etc.
Great, thank you, Valeria. Christine, did that answer work for you? Did that help?
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, gente. I think we're gonna start wrapping it up. We've been here for about an hour and 15 minutes, and I had a great time chatting with you all. I know that our community is definitely going to really benefit from this conversation, because the more we have this conversation, the more we talk about Latinos in VC, what opportunities there are, and how we can help change those numbers and get more Latinos funded, the better it is for all of us. And apologies for my monster puppy. She says hello. So gotta love the live spaces. But anyway, I wanted to thank you all, and I wanted to go ahead and give you all a moment to give our panel a moment to just share any last words that you would like with our audience. And so we will go around with starting with Marcos Fernandez first. Marcos, is there anything that any last thoughts you'd like to share with us?
No, just sincere thank you to Danae and Marcos G and Valeria for the opportunity to share this for those who have listened in. Congratulations to you, because if you're listening in, that means that you care about venture capital or being a founder. And if you're looking to take that leap, there are so many resources out there, and people like us who are trying to help each other out and help each other win. And the only thing I'll kind of leave everyone with is, I am able to work on the things that I am because of the incredible people who came before me and mentored me and helped open doors. And it's just as important as we all grow in our own respective careers that we are constantly thinking about how we can open doors for those behind us. And that's through internship programs, but that's also through a phone call, a Zoom call, a coffee chat, an introduction. Let's just make sure that we are always constantly not just thinking about how we can grow our own funds and our own companies individually, but making sure that we're taking care of each other as we do so. And we'll leave a better mark on this world than when we found it. And for our kids, and the next generations that enter, it'll be even better as well. So, yeah, that's probably it. Thanks again for the opportunity, Danae. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Marcos, and thank you for all of your insights today. We really appreciated having you here with us. And I will go over to Marcos Gonzalez. Marcos, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with today?
Marcos had to step away. He received a call that he had to take, so I don't know that he'll be able to address the question, Danae. So I'll go ahead and go in his place if that's okay.
Absolutely,
um,
but please.
Thank you, first of all, Danae and Marcos F, for allowing me to be part of this panel. It's been great. I think for everyone that's listening in, founders and entrepreneurs, it's a tough journey. I think we've mentioned you're probably going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes, but it's okay. Keep going. All you need is that one investor that believes in you, to write that first check, and then from there, the signaling that comes from that can be quite positive. So just keep going, si se puede. The other thing I'll add is build a community of other founders and entrepreneurs that are also building companies like you, because you'd be surprised how much can be shared and learned from one another in terms of best practices. Even just having someone going through the journey with you can be incredibly helpful. But even going as far as sharing potential client contacts or sales contacts, etc. So definitely lean on each other. I think is the best way. I think, as Marcos F alluded, as you continue to climb, make sure that you're lifting others up on that journey. Thank you, Danae.
Thank you so much. I love that. I love that. I think that's a great last thought. As you continue to climb, make sure you take others in your journey. Thank you so much, Valeria, for joining us. I want to thank our panel again, and Marcos Gonzalez. Look at that. I avoided screwing up up until my very last point. Oh man. Okay. So I did not confuse your names until just now. Anyway, I want to thank all three of you for joining us, Marcos F, Marcos G, and Valeria. And I want to thank all of our audience for joining. And I know I see some of you who I know have startups, and some are also fintech startups. And so I really appreciate you coming in here and, taking charge and learning, because we're all here to learn. And so, again, I appreciate everybody that came to listen, and also for our panel. I hope everybody has a great day. We're going to go ahead and shut down the room in the next 5 seconds. Feel free to unmute and say your goodbyes. You're in Amigos. Adios.
Adiós, gracias.
Adios.